The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
What is going on, CaneSport, and good morning to you all. It is Izubee Charles, joined by Steven Wagner. Thank you for starting your Monday off with us here at Good Morning CaneSport. We have a ton of Miami Hurricanes news for you today, so we're going to jump right into it. We continue our countdown of Miami's top 30 players with 30 reps or more. Over the weekend, we had guys like Ethan O'Connor and Charles Brantley, and now we're halfway through the list at number 15, CJ Daniels. As we all know, CJ recently transferred from LSU and comes to Miami, comes in a very, great time for the Hurricanes, who are coming off a very successful season, but they're looking to replace a lot of production from that wide receiver room, and the Canes are hoping CJ Daniels could do just that. First, spent some time at Liberty. Miami almost landed him in the transfer portal last year, but they get it done this season. So even C.J. Daniels coming in, a guy that wasn't as productive at LSU as he was at Liberty, but a guy the Hurricanes really, really like. And Miami needs to replace a lot of production in that wide receiver room. Do you think C.J. can do that? And just what are your thoughts about the guys that you think may be able to step up for the Canes in 2025 as wide receiver?
Yeah, so I absolutely do think CJ can be one of those dudes who takes a step forward. Although, I mean, kind of talking, to some folks that I know, in Miami's athletic department, I know that there are very high expectations for JoJo Trader. They absolutely believe that JoJo Trader is going to be a better version of Jacoby George. Everyone in the facility that I've heard of, really, really likes him. Everyone that I've talked to has spoken very, very well about him. They've said really good things about him during workouts last year and during practices. It was just kind of one of those deals where, maybe they kind of felt like he needs a little bit more time before he's really able to see the game field. But he's one of those dudes that they're really expecting to take a step forward this year. I talked to someone last year who said during offseason workouts that they thought he might be the most fluid athlete that they had in their program. He was just still a dude who was, kind of raw and still, needed some development. Nye Carr is another dude that I am really excited about. Even though, physically he has kind of turned into one of those like tweener type of receivers, but absolutely still nonetheless a dude who I still do think, they can get some production from. And then hopefully you can go ahead and add CJ Daniels on the outside. Now, as far as, and real quick, just I do want to clarify, because I know that people are going to ask this on the message boards, because they've asked in the past, about, what about Joshua Moore? And, do we think Joshua Moore can be one of those dudes who can step in right away? I do think that Joshua Moore absolutely does have that potential. And I do believe that right now he has the highest true ceiling of any high school recruit, or of any high school receiver recruit that Miami has in their receiver room. Although I do also think that he is very, very raw and is going to need some college level coaching to kind of, sandpaper out some of those bumps. But I also kind of think that with the way that this team is sort of shaping up, they do have a quarterback who I believe is very good, not incredible. I don't think will be a Cam Ward, but a very good quarterback in Carson Beck. It looks like they should have solid production along the perimeter, but I really think that this team next year is going to kind of return more to, what Mario Cristobal's teams have historically kind of been. And that is, downhill running teams that are based around the offensive line. They can kind of get away with, good to okay quarterback play, and then sort of use receivers on the perimeter as needed. I think that next year, this is going to be a team that is going to kind of, shift back to that more traditional form that more, I shouldn't say traditional, but the form of football that we've more come to expect from Mario Cristobal, where it really leans on offensive line and running game. Because next year, I really do think that it should be, absolutely tremendous with the way their personnel is shaping up right now.
Yeah, I really do agree with you. And, obviously, it's going to be very hard to replace guys like Xavier Sherpo, Jacoby George, even Elijah Royal, who was a real big-time pass catcher for the Canes. But a lot of young talent, obviously, in the wide receiver room. You mentioned, guys like Joshua Moore, JoJo Trader. Hey, maybe even, Ray Joseph, who's coming in his third year, maybe take that next step and become a guy, there. And, another freshman I've been very high and always talk about very highly is Malachi Tony. I think he can potentially even come in and make some plays for the Hurricanes. They think he's a real polished guy. I know he reclassified from 2020 2026, but they think he can make some big plays for the Cane. So this wide receiver room is going to look very, very, very different than it has these past few years. But I think CJ Daniels is going to be looked upon as that leader, as a guy that, came from a big-time SEC program to the Canes. And like you mentioned, Carson Beck, a very good quarterback who I think is going to be able to make those guys look good on the outside. So make sure to check out that story that we have on CJ Daniels, kind of just recapping his career up to Miami, what we think he can do for the Canes, on the site this morning. Kind of want to rewind a little bit, some of the stories that we had this past weekend. Had the chance to catch up with Miami second-year baseball coach JT Arteaga. Make sure to check out that story on him. Kind of talks about the season being 3 weeks away. Obviously, Canes had their struggles last year on the diamond, but they're looking to rebound this year. Guys like Daniel Coué coming back, looking to make a big impact for the Canes. So make sure you check that out this past weekend. And also want to talk about my time in Tampa, as you guys follow. If you guys follow us on Twitter and X or whatever it may be, Instagram, I was up there at Pylon in Tampa checking out some 7-on-7 guys, as well as the Power Line series, which is a 5-on-5 competition between offense and defensive linemen. And the one guy that really caught my attention is 4-star defense lineman Freddie Wilson out of Spruce Creek up there in Daytona Beach. He got a visit from Mario Cristobal earlier in the year, and he decided to lock in an official visit and is set to do that in June while taking another visit in the spring. So make sure to check out that story that we have on Freddie Wilson. And it's really intriguing to hear what he said. I said, hey, it's in January. I know there's a long time until June. Why do you want to lock in an official visit with Miami? He simply said, hey, spots in Miami go up pretty quickly, so why not try to establish that relationship with them? The window's there to take that official visit, and he went ahead and set that with the Canes. Honestly, he's also very familiar with Coach Heatherman, who recruited him at Minnesota. So he called that the cherry on top, seeing him come from Minnesota to Miami, continue to recruit him. Steven, I know we're super, super far away from official visit season, but just, we've seen a lot of guys starting to lock in those OVs early with Miami. Just want to get your thoughts on that, man.
Yeah, I mean, kind of the way that the college football recruiting has changed over the last couple of years. Of course, all recruitments really do come down to December, but I think that we've consistently seen that the more of your class that you can, have established by, the middle of the summer, the more progress that you're able to make in the spring, the more likely that you probably are going to be in pretty good shape once we actually get to the fall or once we actually get to December. I mean, just thinking back over, the last couple of years, looking at maybe some other classes. I mean, like take LSU, for instance. LSU last year was a program who objectively we kind of thought that their recruiting late in the season sort of fell apart. It looked like their class, really did fall apart just, with the talent they lost between losing, 5-star Bryce Underwood to LSU or to Michigan and 5-star Cade Phillips to Texas, because both of those dudes just got unbelievable NIL deals. But objectively, I mean, they still finished in the top 10. And whenever you look at, kind of how they assembled their class, a lot of it was done, by the middle of the summer, by the start of the actual season. I mean, when the season when the fall season started, they were in the running, to have a real chance to finish with the number one class. Last year, Miami, they were always somewhere sort of between that 8 to 12 range, really, during the summer and, kind of at the start of the fall season. And, we were kind of, projecting how they would end up finishing in the top 10. I think they ended up finishing 13th in the On3 team ratings. But it still ended up, they still ended up with a top 15 class overall, even though they did end up losing some talent down the stretch. I really do think that there is true value in being able to get these dudes to lock in official visits and being able to show early on that they really do have interest, because I think that paves a path in order for your team to potentially have success recruiting these guys down the line. Because I think it's much, much harder to potentially end up landing these dudes if you didn't get them down for a summer official visit. I think that was one thing that kind of frankly bit them in the ass with TJ Alford last year was, they really tried to slow play it. He ended up not taking an official visit to Miami during the spring. I briefly thought that there could be during the summer, I briefly thought that there could be a second where he could end up taking an official visit during the season. But for a school like Miami that really doesn't want to do official visits during the season, you need to lay a lot of the foundation for your class during the spring and during the summer. So the earlier that you're able to get these dudes to actually commit themselves and lock in for some of these visits. The way I see it, that's absolutely for the better.
Yeah, I agree with you too, and especially we saw how the recruiting calendar kind of shifted, this cycle. Obviously, we saw in the 2023 class and the 2022 class, Miami getting those late additions, those late in-home visits. We didn't see that at all in December, so I feel like Miami kind of has to, mix up the formula, how they recruit, how they approach it. Because, like you mentioned, obviously you want to, have top guys in your class for a very long time, but similar to LSU, you see guys kind of get picked apart, at the end. So I feel like it has to come down to a combination of getting guys that want to be Canes early, and then, during the later ends of the cycle, really, really try to get those flip targets and those guys that have been battling, for the past 2 years. So with Freddie Wilson being, one of the many guys that have locked in official visits, really interesting to see. I don't really remember hearing guys say, hey, I'm locking in an official visit last time in January. I obviously heard rumors I want to take an OV here or that, but hearing a guy say, hey, I'm taking that in June, I want to get on the board with the Canes potentially, something that, is interesting here. And, make sure to check out that update on Freddie, who talked about, his relationship with Coach Chris Ball and Coach Heatherman as well. And, another, big guy in the trenches that I want to talk about is 2026, the number one overall prospect, Jackson Cantwell. He hasn't officially set, return date for Miami, but he did visit in the fall, and the Hurricanes, returned that favor and made their way up to Missouri to go check in on him. Stephen, you caught up with his mother who talked about the recruitment and all that good stuff. Just kind of give a quick rundown on, that conversation you had with her, and where do you think Miami stands with Cantwell?
So what I can tell you for sure is Miami is going to shoot their shot. They absolutely feel like they are going to have, some sort of a chance if they really shoot their shot. They put in the effort because from everyone that Cantwell's camp has talked to, there is a lot of respect for Alex Mirabal. Cantwell and his family, they really, really think highly of Cristobal and Mirabal as offensive line coaches and developers. They're both very impressed with the work they've done at Oregon. They've been really impressed with the way they've, developed and really, changed the build of this offensive line at Miami. Although right now, I really do think the biggest obstacle they're going to have with a guy like Cantwell is just being able to convince him to squeeze in a visit to Miami, because you look at the number of programs that this guy has after him. I mean, he really is being recruited by absolutely everyone in America. And, this isn't necessarily one of those, Jeremiah Smith deals where, he is going to be, a top 5, top 10 player, whatever in the country. But, he's really between, some of the Florida schools and then Ohio State. Cantwell coming from a place like Nixon, Missouri, that really is, I think, one of these areas where, there are a ton of programs that are absolutely in play for him. Now, obviously, Missouri, as we've seen in recent years, has really, really stepped up their NIL game in trying to keep guys from Missouri home, trying to keep some of those top players home. I mean, you can remember a couple of years ago, they kept Williams Nweri, who was, I can't remember what he finished as, but I know he was a top 5 recruit. I know he was number 1 on a couple of different sites. I can't remember if he was number 1 on On3 or not. But he was a 5-star defensive lineman. They ended up being able to keep him home. It looked like they were on the cusp of keeping Ryan Wingo home before he went to Texas. And, Texas just, from my understanding, just dropped an absolutely bombshell NIL deal on him at the last second. But with the number of schools that Cantwell has after him, he is planning on just visiting so many programs right now. I honest to God have no idea if his schedule is going to allow him to be able to go ahead and make the trip to Miami. Miami would absolutely love to host him because they absolutely want to shoot their shot. They really want to try to show him why Coral Gables could be the place for him. It's just right now there are so many schools that he has prior visit commitments to. I have no clue if he's going to be able to squeeze in a trip to Miami or not.
Yeah, and we always talk about it when, we're writing our stories and our CaneSport takes on how crucial it is to getting these guys on campus. And obviously there is a growing interest with Cantwell and, the Hurricanes, like we talked about earlier. He did visit Miami in the fall, watched Miami, got around Coral Gables, got to experience a little bit. Obviously, he was just joined by his mother, but I think bringing his entire family back will be crucial in, this recruitment. And like you mentioned, Missouri's going to be a player, in his recruitment, in-state guy. They want to keep the best in Missouri home. He's obviously not only the best in Missouri, Missouri, but the best in the entire country. And one thing I always want to talk about too, we've mentioned a little bit, offensive line is going to be a huge priority for the Canes in that 2026 cycle, because you look across the board during the 2025 season, Miami could potentially lose all 5 starters on the offensive line. Obviously, you don't want to say, hey, we're going to bring in 5 true freshmen to start, but that is going to be a position of need, and the Canes are looking to address that this cycle. So I think Cantwell, like we talked about, the number 1 player in the country, why not pitch to him the idea, hey, you can come in and start day one similar to Francis Marino. Obviously, you have to earn that role, but it's going to be a huge opportunity for you there. So make sure to check out that update on Cantwell. And, another big target that I want to talk about on the offensive line is 2026 legacy Grant Wise, who got a visit from Coach Alex Mirabal not too long ago. I believe a week or so ago. We have an update on him from this weekend. And, just being able to pick Grant's brain a little bit. He's a legacy, but one thing that he always makes clear is, hey, I'm not, dialed in to go to Miami just because, my dad went there. I do have other options, but he had a lot of great things to say about Alex Mirabal and just the development that he has, done, during his time in Oregon, like you mentioned, and, during his time at Miami in the short time he'd been here. So make sure to check out that update on Grant Wise, who is a top target for the Canes in that 2026 class. And another offensive lineman, I feel like you said, this is going to be a huge, huge priority for the Canes. Geneve Carr from IMG Academy. Steven, you had the chance to talk with him a little bit. He's becoming a big-time priority for the Canes in that 2026 class. What's Mr. Carr kind of saying about the Canes, and where do things stand with him?
Yeah, so what he said was there's no place like Miami. He absolutely has remained very, very, very interested in Miami. Although, I will say, I will tell Canes fans to kind of proceed with caution a little bit, whenever they're checking out some of our stuff on Carr, because while he absolutely is, a guy that Miami's showing some interest in, and in my opinion, a very good player. He's also someone that I've noticed he, typically, and this is very common of a lot of high school recruits. He's really high on a lot of schools coming off of their visits. There absolutely is an effect of having a post-visit high, and we see that across, really all football recruiting. At the high school level, maybe not quite as much in the transfer portal, but at the high school level, absolutely. And that's why a lot of coaches and a lot of staffs really try to get kids to commit, while they're on these visits or shortly off of these visits, is to really take command of some of that momentum that they've been able to generate. Carr absolutely has very, very real interest in Miami. Likes Cristobal a lot, likes Mirabal a lot, likes campus a lot. He's from Orlando. Miami absolutely fits, is sort of, the culture that he's used to, just in terms of, big Florida city. He's got a lot of schools after him right now. There's still a really long way to go in his recruitment, but he's absolutely a kid that we are going to continue monitoring very, very closely. He is someone that Miami does want to keep seeing a little bit more out of in terms of, his development and how he continues to progress. He's still, pretty raw overall as a prospect. And Miami does kind of want to see him, kind of continue to grow in some certain areas. So I do think spring evaluation will be fairly important for him, especially. But definitely a kid that I'll be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, and he goes to a very, good school, IMG Academy, as you all known for producing, top level guys across the country. And, he has the potential to be one of those guys. And, we think Miami sees that in him. But like you mentioned, going to be some time before things really get rolling in his recruitment. So make sure to check out that update on him and the other several updates that we have on site. Just want to run through some of them real quick. Real quick story about Xavier Restrepo. Obviously, we know he's, getting prepared for the NFL draft, at the Senior Bowl, which kicked off this morning today on Monday. And, had the chance to catch up with him 2 weekends ago. Just said, hey, man, obviously you should be prepared for the NFL draft, but why are you, coaching this, 7-on-7, 12U team? And he just said, hey, man, I just want to give back to the kids similar to, other people gave back to me. I thought it was really cool. And actually, one of the 12U kids on his team holds the offer from the Miami Hurricanes. Young man by the name of Roderick Lewis III has an offer from the Miami Hurricanes and the Auburn Tigers, and he's only in 6th grade. And, Xavier's kind of taking that leadership and kind of guiding him through the early stages of the process, which I thought was really cool. So if you haven't, checked out that story on Xavier Restrepo, make sure to give that a look, and all our other news on the site from this past weekend, and that's going to be flowing through this morning. So that's all that we have for this episode of Good Morning CaneSport. For Stephen Wagner, I'm Izubee Charles. Thank you all for watching. Have a great rest of your day.